Imagine this. It's 6:30 in the morning, right in the shadow of the White House, and a piece of living history is being torn down. A volunteer trying to stop it just says what everyone's thinking. This is a disgrace. And that single moment, it's the flashpoint in a story that's been going on for over 40 years. So, what is this all about? This is the story of the White House Peace Vigil. We're going to break down what it is, how it all started, and why, after 4 incredible decades, it suddenly found itself in the crosshairs. All right, let's get into it. And the spark that lit the fuse? Well, it was a direct order. A correspondent called the vigil's tent an eyesore and a health hazard, and President Trump's response was simple and direct. Take it down. That set the stage for a showdown that was, honestly, decades in the making. And that showdown happened just one day later. This wasn't just any protest. It's considered the longest-running political protest in the history of the United States. And suddenly, it was under a very real, very immediate threat. So here's the play-by-play of what went down. Super early in the morning, Park Police show up and take apart the blue tent, the one that's been a fixture in Lafayette Square forever. The official line was that it was for beautification. But, true to form, the activists showed some serious grit. Within hours, they had their signs right back up. But this whole thing just raises a huge question, right? How on earth does a protest manage to last for over 40 years? You don't survive that long by accident. To really get the determination we saw in 2025, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the Cold War. Okay, so let's jump in our time machine. The year is 1981. The entire world is holding its breath, absolutely terrified of nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union. And it's in that incredibly tense environment that this small but powerful idea starts to take root. This whole thing was built by just a handful of unbelievably dedicated people. It all started with one guy, William Thomas, who began protesting nuclear weapons in June of '81. A couple of months later, Concepcion Picciotto joined him, and her name would become legendary. Then Ellen Benjamin came on board, and together they figured out the 24/7 rotation that was needed to make this thing last. So what was their mission? I mean, it started with a focus on stopping nuclear weapons, but it grew into so much more. For more than 40 years, that little patch of sidewalk became a constant, round-the-clock call for an end to nuclear weapons, an end to all wars, and a demand for basic human rights everywhere. But this story was never really about the signs or the tent. It's a story about human dedication on a scale that's almost hard to wrap your head around. The sheer commitment to keep a protest going for that long, through every kind of weather, through every political change, it's just staggering. 34. Just look at that number. That's how many years Concepcion Picciotto personally stood her ground in Lafayette Square. Her commitment was so absolute, she actually earned a Guinness World Record for it. 34 years. Let that sink in for a minute. And this quote from Picciotto really gets to the heart of her philosophy. She saw how everything was connected. For her, it wasn't just about one single issue. It was about the entire system of conflict. And that belief is what fueled her for over 3 decades, right on the doorstep of the most powerful person on the planet. And if you want to talk about grit, man, this is it. I mean, think about what they went through. They didn't pack up during Hurricane Sandy. When their camp was torn down once before in 2013, they had it back up the very same day. And maybe most incredible of all, the vigil kept going even after its founders passed away. That just shows you how powerful their idea really was. For decades, this protest was a totally physical, analog thing. But as the world went digital, its story started getting told in a whole new way. So how does a protest that started in 1981 even show up in the internet age? So we did a little digging. Where do we first see the vigil pop up online? It looks like the earliest digital footprints show up in 2009. First, there's a YouTube video calling Picciotto Obama's closest neighbor. Then, a few months later, a post on what we now call X shared a photo of her pointing out her constant presence. This was the moment the vigil's long analog story started to be saved forever online. And all of this brings us right back to September 2025. This latest takedown has really fired up a classic American debate, right? It's that fundamental clash between two core values, our right to free speech and the government's need to maintain public order.
And you can see the two sides of the argument laid out pretty clearly here. On one side, you have the White House talking about aesthetics and safety, calling it an eyesore and tying it to clearing homeless encampments. But the activists fire back that it's not an encampment at all. Nobody sleeps there. They argue it's a political vigil, a symbol protected by the First Amendment.
And this distinction right here is the absolute core of their argument. The vigil's current leader, Philippos Malacubello, lays it out. A vigil with political signs is a form of protest. It's legally protected speech, and it's fundamentally different from a place where people are living. This is the legal ground they're standing on.
So where does that leave us right now? Well, the tent is gone, for now, but the vigil itself, it's still there. The signs are back, the volunteers are on duty, and the protest continues while its supporters are looking at their legal options. This story is definitely not over.
And all this leaves us with a really big question, one that goes way beyond this one protest. For over 40 years, this vigil has been part of the landscape in D.C., a landmark of dissent. Its story really forces us to ask, when a protest becomes a permanent fixture, where do you draw the line between free speech and public order? And who gets to make that call?